Hey everybody, this is your right geek, honorary man king, and leader of the Awkward Cough Squad. Happy Black Friday, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of my series, TV That Shaped the Right Geek. Obviously, this episode this week is going to be on 321 Contact. 321 Contact was a show that aired on PBS in the 80s from about 1980 to 1988. Obviously, it's another brainchild of the Children's Television Workshop, and it often aired around the same time that Square One aired. If you guys watch episode 2, you know I did an episode on Square One TV, which was also very much a part of my formative development. So the concept of 321 Contact was basically to bring science out of the laboratory and make it more palatable to young people. So they wanted to get the idea of science away from men in lab coats and show that it actually had real world relevance, that it had real world applications. So the way that they tried to make science more attractive to the target audience, which was again the same target audience as Square One, basically upper elementary, lower middle school age students. So they brought in presenters that were instead of being men in lab coats, although they did talk to men in lab coats sometimes during the show, they were young. They were a young and diverse cast of hosts to sort of bring the young eyes in and make the young people more interested in science. So we had a young and diverse cast because, of course, diversity wasn't invented 5 years ago. Diversity was something that was very much a part of TV, even in the 80s. I can speak as someone who lived through the 80s, so this was certainly, the idea of having a diverse cast was certainly not out of the ordinary, even 40 years ago. So this is just another picture of some of the hosts that you had on 321 Contact during this period. And the way that as I said, this show focused on real-world applications of scientific ideas, and on the show, they generally speaking took trips to interesting places in the world, and most of the time it was just the emphasis was just on exploring the world, exploring how things worked in the world, and then occasionally, and then once we've explored the world and seen something fascinating about the world, then there would be kind of a scientific explanation of how a bubble forms, or how do sound waves work, or something like that. So kind of like Square One on the math side, 321 Contact wasn't necessarily a rigorous science curriculum. It was more designed to inspire interest in science, so that the students, the young people watching it, would want to explore it further. 321 Contact did have an accompanying magazine that you could subscribe to. Here's some pictures here of some other people's vintage magazines that they've collected. So the magazine would have articles and games and stuff like that that were associated with some of the things that were covered within the show. Later on, once Square One TV became a thing too, some Square One TV content also made it into this magazine as well. So these two shows are very intimately connected, which is probably why I got influenced by both of them. Also, like Square One, 321 Contact had a semi-regular detective sketch. This one was called the Bloodhound Gang. So you had these young people solving mysteries. In this case, using scientific principles instead of math principles. Of course, in Square One, you had the MathNet sketch, which was the characters there were using problem solving and math concepts in order to solve mysteries. Here, it's the same basic concept, but it's now young people using scientific principles to do the same. So we have here the Bloodhound Gang cast. If you're an 80s kid, you probably remember these kids. I'm going to guess if you were an 80s kid who watched a lot of PBS like I did. So that is kind of the basics of 3-2-1 Contact. Now, let me tell you what I remember most about 3-2-1 Contact, or the thing that really impacted me most. I know that 3-2-1 Contact had an impact on me because what I remember most clearly was a set of episodes in the final season. So that would be the 1988 season. I was 9 years old. They went to Antarctica. So they actually physically went to Antarctica, to the South Pole. And what those episodes revealed to 9-year-old me about the extreme environment of Antarctica, it really had a tremendous impact on me. I clearly remember, actually, there was one little segment in one of the episodes where the hosts had to get dressed in order to go outside the scientific compound where they were staying. And I remember that they showed all the layers that you had to put on in order to go out into Antarctica's extreme cold. And I don't know what it was about that just really struck me to my very core. But from that point on, Antarctica was a place of fascination for me as a kid, to the point that my brother and I, because we were growing up in the 80s and we had video game consoles, we didn't have the internet. We had basically our own brains, the library, and we had outside. When we had nothing else to do, a lot of times we would sit in one of our bedrooms and we would just sit there and we would tell stories to each other. We would make up these stories about these imaginary people going on adventures and doing amazing things. And one of these quote unquote pretends that we would do was something that we called the Zinkley pretend. This was the family. This was the Zinkley family. I don't know how we came up with that name, but that's the name that they had. And because of 3-2-1 Contact specifically, we decided that this family lived in a dome in Antarctica because we were super fascinated with Antarctica. Thanks to 3-2-1 Contact, we set that family there. And, there's a lot of other interesting things about this Zinkley pretend too, because this Zinkley family was filled with, they were essentially superheroes before I even had a concept of what that was. They were essentially like our version of the Fantastic Four, because they had, there were super geniuses in the group and all of that. And well, I think that's interesting because it really shows that a concept like the Fantastic Four, it's a primordial thing, I think. If I could come up with it before I had any exposure to Marvel Comics whatsoever, it really shows how much that a superhero team like the Fantastic Four, it strikes to something that is primordial in the human child, something that something that's going to naturally strike a child's fancy. Anyway, so that's what I have to say about 3-2-1 Contact. How many of you are old enough to have watched this show? If you have, what did you think about it? How did it impact your life? Were you also fascinated when they went to Antarctica? Did Antarctica become a setting in all of your pretend stories? Please let me know in the comments below, and I will speak to you again next week.